Every neighborhood has secrets, and every dispute leaves a trail. Welcome to the Drama Files. I thought the property dispute was over, but the real battle was only beginning. After Karen declared herself the newly elected HOA president, I knew my life was about to get difficult. But I had no idea just how far this woman was willing to go to completely destroy me. It started on a Tuesday, exactly 3 days after the land surveyor proved her garage was illegally on my property. I walked out to my mailbox to grab the Daily Post, expecting nothing but regular bills and junk mail. Instead, I found 5 thick, official-looking envelopes bearing the Neighborhood Homeowners Association seal.
Ripped the first one open standing right there in the driveway, and my jaw practically hit the concrete.
It was a formal citation fining me $250 because my grass was, quote, half an inch over the permitted height. I opened the second letter. Another $250 fine because my trash cans were left out 10 minutes past the deadline.
Karen wasn't just mad about the property line anymore. She was using her new power to wage financial warfare.
Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated from annoying to absolutely suffocating. By the end of the month, Karen had sent me 18 separate violation notices. Together, they added up to nearly $4,500 in fines. I knew something wasn't right, so I started reading every HOA rule I could find. The more I read, the more obvious it became that several of those violations didn't even exist. Karen wasn't enforcing the rules. She was inventing entirely new ones. Instead of arguing with her, I decided to document absolutely everything.
Every letter, every notice, and every email became part of my growing evidence file.
Karen seemed convinced that constant pressure would eventually make me give up. But every new letter only strengthened the case I was quietly building. I still didn't know exactly how this would end, but I knew I was finally prepared.
Then came the notice that crossed every line.
Karen claimed my backyard fence violated community standards and demanded I remove it within 30 days.
The problem was, that fence had been approved years before I even bought the house.
I still had every document the previous owner had given me during the purchase.
Right there was the original HOA approval, signed nearly 8 years earlier. Karen had issued a violation against something her own HOA had officially approved.
I immediately made digital copies and backed everything up. Then I sent Karen a polite email with every approval document attached. She read the email and never replied. That silence told me she already knew The evidence wasn't on her side.
A few days later, the notice for the monthly HOA board meeting finally arrived. I spent the entire evening organizing every document I had collected.
Every violation notice, photograph, email, and approval letter had its own section. When meeting night arrived, I walked into the clubhouse carrying everything.
Karen looked completely confident as she prepared to lead the meeting.
Good evening, everyone. Let's begin. Tonight, we'll be discussing several ongoing community violations.
I stayed quiet and waited for exactly the right moment.
Our next issue concerns repeated violations at this property.
I stood up, picked up my binder, and politely asked if I could respond. The entire room became silent as every neighbor turned to look at me. I opened my binder and placed the first document on the table. I explained that my fence had already been officially approved years before I moved in. Several neighbors quietly looked over the paperwork for themselves.
That approval may no longer apply under current community standards.
Then I presented the updated HOA records that proved nothing had ever been changed.
The room became noticeably quieter as everyone compared the two documents.
For the first time that evening, Karen seemed unsure of what to say next. But I wasn't finished. I had brought every email we had exchanged. Every message showed that I had repeatedly asked for clarification and never received an answer.
I could tell the meeting had started to move in a very different direction.
I'd like to ask a question before we continue.
Can you explain how these fines were calculated?
They were issued according to HOA policy.
I reviewed our financial records, and these numbers don't seem to match.
We should consider the impact on local traffic. The room suddenly became much more interested in the discussion.
These records don't fully support the violation amounts that were issued.
I'll have to review those records after tonight's meeting.
For the first time, I realized I wasn't the only person asking difficult questions.
Everyone deserves to review these numbers before we make any decisions.
The meeting had taken an unexpected turn, and it was clear the real conversation had only just begun. There's something else everyone should probably see.
These expense records don't match the fines that were collected. These expenses that were collected.
There may be additional paperwork that hasn't been included yet.
I didn't say a word. The evidence was beginning to speak for itself.
Could you explain why these figures are different from the official ledger?
I'll verify every record before making any final statement.
Quiet conversations began spreading.
Weeks of careful preparation were finally paying off.
Before we continue, I recommend the board reviews every one of these documents.
For the first time since all of this began, I felt the truth was finally being heard.
The room stayed unusually quiet while everyone reviewed the evidence.
The documents appear to tell a very consistent story, from the initial filing to the final approval.
I'd like a moment to review everything before responding.
I had waited weeks for this moment, and now I simply let the facts speak. My neighbors were reading the same documents Karen had tried to ignore.
Can we also review when these notices were officially approved?
I'll need to verify those dates with the HOA records.
Every answer raised another question that the documents could help explain.
I believe a complete review of these records would benefit everyone.
The conversation had shifted completely, and everyone was focused on understanding the full picture.
The board had now seen every document I brought with me. They carefully compared every report before reaching a conclusion.
Based on these records, I believe we should review each violation individually.
I'm willing to cooperate with a full review of the records.
That was the first time I felt the situation was finally moving toward a fair outcome. My neighbors seemed more interested in the facts than the accusations. These records need to be accurate.
This is about our community.
We'll examine everything carefully before making any final decisions.
My job was never to argue. It was simply to present the truth. Neither of us said another word, but everything had changed.
As I walked out that evening, I realized this story was far from over. Sometimes the strongest response isn't anger. It's having the truth documented. But this story isn't over yet. Next time,
on the Drama Files. One unexpected mistake changes everything.
Next time on the Drama Files. The bait worked perfectly. At 2 o'clock in the morning, my security camera alerts went off. Karen was creeping across my lawn with a baseball bat, completely out of control.
She didn't stop with the lawn flamingo. Moments later, she started striking my parked car.
But she didn't realize the trap had already worked, and officers were quietly watching from down the street.
Everything came together that night. Don't miss the next episode of The Drama Files.
If you enjoyed this story, and join us next time for another unbelievable neighborhood dispute where the truth always comes to light.